Morning, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting of the Anchorage Assembly Committee on Homelessness to order. We'll start with introductions, starting with Ms. Kennedy. Crystal Kennedy.
Forrest Dunbar.
Felix Rivera.
Meg Salatel.
Can you speak clear?
Sure, I've got a mic too here. Hold on. Hello? Oh, hold on. Okay. Hello. Ooh, wow. Okay. So we're going to do something a little bit different today, as you can see on the agenda, and actually a couple of things. One, you'll see note cards passed out. We're still working on our frequently asked questions. So far, the participation has been low. Ask your questions, please. We know you've got them. Write them down, get them to us. We'll get the answers. So we're going to start with 10 minutes of audience participation here at the beginning. We're going to ask you to choose to either participate at the beginning or at the end. And then after the first 10 minutes, we'll get into our two presentations. And just so I don't forget to let you all know, we will not be meeting next month, but then we'll meet again in January. All right, would anyone like to participate? Step on up, 3 minutes.
I just want to commend Meg and the co-sponsors of the amendments and for all of those assembly people that supported it as well. I thought that took guts and it took leadership, and I was just totally blown away, and I just want to thank everyone involved in supporting it. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Can you come back and state your name for the record, please?
Linda Chase.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah? Go ahead.
She was civil compared to last month.
Very good.
Ron Oliva. A couple things. I'm adjacent to the Brother Francis shelter. You sent another 160 cold weather people at night and closed the day shelter, which means I'm so overrun and surrounded by the homeless that you've added to, plus Robin Ward of the Heritage Land Bank refuses to fix the fence. There are at least 60 camps behind the old Native Hospital, and it's called, if I can quote a very progressive assembly person, Party Hill. Well, it's party hell for me because I got to close the gates. And the economic interference is if someone comes to pick up an item and pay me for it, they ride by and see the gates closed because they wander in, pick up what they want, and wander out. To confront them, unfortunately, I got to spend the night in jail because the police can't respond in a timely manner. Now, I want to sell out. I'm basically out of money. My cash flow, credit cards are tapped out. It's hard for me to continue to stay in business if I have to keep coming here addressing a theft problem, a drug sales problem, a prostitution problem. You don't hear the screams that I hear every morning. And I have to renew my noise permit because when the women get beat up, 911 doesn't do it. I gotta blow my train horn, I gotta blow my siren to allow that woman to take a pause, or else he's gonna put her in the middle of next week. So this has been very trying on me. I've gone to the police chaplain, to a sociologist, and now I'm seeing a psychologist because I gotta get more tools to cope with this. And last night, when you say you can't shuffle money, you didn't get to the bond issue, and I've been promised by Robin Ward and Pan Wipes to buy my property after the first of the year. That was this year. Now you're putting on contingencies. You have to study it. What do you have to study for $50,000? Buy the property because ML and Pay is leaving, and you should take over those those buildings and make it a homeless campus. The food bank is down there. They're looking for a $4.1 million building. That whole block is owned by ML&P, except for my property, and you should look at Bindlestick Park, because I'm heavily in debt.
Thank you, Ron.
Do you have any questions? Miss
That was
Kennedy,
skinny.
are you going to eat all that? See, you don't want to share.
Would anybody else like to participate? Yes.
My name's Tom McGrath, and thank you for all the work that you did towards last night. I think it was great. Midtown does need a center. Right now, the library is being used to a great extent, and it's just not the place probably, even though a lot of services are being provided out of there. About 15 years ago, I led an effort to have a Midtown partnership like the downtown partnership, but it failed because it wasn't time, or wasn't the time. Also, 15 years ago, we finished the Midtown plan, and it never went to the assembly for approval, and it's still sitting on a shelf collecting dust someplace. So I think if you made huge progress in the last 4 years, I think in the future, we need to look at a Midtown plan, and we also need to look at a Midtown partnership so that the people in Midtown are invested in what happens in Midtown. Thank you.
Mr. Rivera.
Thank you. Just a quick comment on that. I want to thank you for those remarks, and want to state that I think we're going to see a resurgence of the Midtown Mafia very soon. Meg and I are already planning on getting new shirts done because we have a lot of big plans. Thank you.
Looks like we have time for one more if anybody else would like to participate. Just state your name for the record, please.
My name is Carl Cancer, and you spell my last name Kancir. This sort of puzzled me why they allowed the Beans Cafe Brother Francis Shelter downtown amongst all the businesses. Now, years ago, I worked for the Army National Guard. There's a wonderful site with buildings, nice buildings, off of Martin Luther King Boulevard, behind the state troopers, behind the that lab they built there, down in the woods, out away from all the businesses. And I know a guy by the name of Couples wrote in, why don't you move that away from downtown where the businesses are, get them away from the businesses, sort of isolate them. So I don't know the logistics, what would be involved, but I think that'd be great, and that would relieve Mr. Oliva's problems.
Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the first item of business, presentation on coordinated entry from Jasmine Boyle from the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness.
Thank you for this opportunity to come talk about coordinated entry. These slides will be sent over to the assembly today so that they can be distributed. There have been quite a few questions from members of the assembly and also members of the public about the system we call coordinated entry. Essentially, I wanted to talk a bit about the as-is, and then at the request of the Assembly Committee on Homelessness, focus in on where we're hoping to go in the future. Coordinated entry was a system designed by HUD, and we were asked to implement it in 2017 nationally. And essentially, it was the idea that there are oftentimes disconnected services available for vulnerable people in the community. If you think about a healthcare system, generally if you go to the hospital, you enter a triage point where someone takes your vitals, determines the next step, what would be most appropriate to meet your needs, and you are gently ushered directly to the services that best match your needs. very simplified, the vision of coordinated entry is to acknowledge that there are generally not enough resources in a community for everybody who might need those resources, and that we need a process to help people access services, triage their needs, and direct them to the most appropriate service. To use the healthcare analogy, we shouldn't be sending somebody with a hangnail to a neurologist. We would not get the most cost-effective and highest quality services building that system. What you'll see is that in Anchorage, we implemented coordinated entry like the majority of other communities in the United States. This graphic here at the bottom is a very simplified version of what coordinated entry looks like in our community today. If you are a person who is at risk of or experiencing homelessness and you call around, you will likely be asked to go to an access point where you will be asked to complete a screening tool called the VI SPDAT. I'm going into this level of detail because this particular tool is a self-report tool. So at that moment, the first time we meet you, we will ask you some deeply personal questions to self-reflect and then make a determination on your level of vulnerability based on that one interaction. We will identify people as high, medium, or low vulnerability, and if they agree to complete that assessment, we will place their name on a housing list. I think as a concept, this was not a terrible idea. What we have found, like every other community in the country, there are some significant challenges around implementation. So a couple of things to note. This does not include access to shelters in our community. Shelters have a completely different pathway full of open doors, as you can imagine. What we have also found, for the sake of time, I'll kind of skim through this. When the budget challenges occurred over the summer, we lost about 50% of our access points. So concern number one right now is that if you are a person experiencing homelessness in this community, there are very limited places for you to do this assessment and even get on the list at this time. I don't frequently bring that up as an issue of significant urgency because I have 1,000 people currently on that list. And in this community, I have very few providers that will treat the people on the list. So if you look at this, this was based on our 2019 housing inventory data, which was run in January. But there are about 600 permanent housing beds that work with people experiencing homelessness in Anchorage. Only 240 of them take referrals from my list. And we can kind of flow through the other service types. But you know, as a logistics person, one of the things I like to point out is priority number one is not getting more names on a list that we already know we don't have adequate outflow for. It really doesn't set up people for success to ask them to reveal deeply personal information, put their name on a list, and then have to explain the reality that we don't have a way to get them off the list. So you'll notice that our focus in the community is about outflow more than it is about inflow at this moment. Once outflow is working, obviously we want everybody that needs services to get to this triage point. So the vision for the future, and I'm more than happy to talk about why the as-is is so challenged, and I'm sure there's many folks that represent frontline services in the audience that could provide commentary on how challenged the current system is. What this messy graphic you see before you represents is how a couple of select communities in the United States have radically changed this coordinated entry vision to look and feel more like a system that shepherds all people in need to the right services. Essentially what it does is anybody in need of a service becomes aware to a central body. That could be through a hub, a day shelter location, an engagement center, an existing service. That could be through a hotline, or that could be through our outreach work, which in Anchorage in 2020 would represent a partnership with the mobile intervention team. But the idea is you find 100% of the people who are at risk of or experiencing homelessness, and they are all coming in through the front door. You get rid of that front end assessment, and you use community data to say, here are the people that we are having a hard time connecting to stable services. We need to prioritize them on the front end, and we attach people to a navigator. I realize this is pretty complex system work, but we frequently talk about Houston and Houston's massive success in decreasing camps. One of the ways that Houston did that was connecting every person in need with a navigator. Columbus, Ohio is a community we've been talking to who's managed to reduce homelessness at the front door by 50% because they have navigators. And to make this real, I had a personal experience in the last year where a family friend called me and was living in a situation that had become violent and needed to go. And immediately was panicked about, I need to find a domestic violence organization, I need to find a new job. Just in such a place of turmoil, she was unable to identify that she had existing resources that could help her. That is what navigation does. That at your first moment of crisis, we help you look through what natural resources do you have. Do you have a church community? Do you have a family member that you could go stay with? Could we give you a plane ticket to get to a place where you have more stability? And communities like Columbus are finding that about 50% of the people that could fall into homelessness and therefore be further traumatized and sort of spiral into a different level of need can actually be stopped right at the front door. But that requires that we invest in navigation services at the front door and that we track data so we can answer to the community, did this actually work? So what you'll notice is this vision incorporates other critical system elements that we have been talking about as part of these meetings, particularly coordinated shelter intake, the use of scan cards to prevent people from having to stand outside in the cold in our winter months. But essentially, the red arrows on the screen are where we anticipate investment in 2020. We cannot take apart the existing system until we have the new system in place as an alternative to offer. And we are very sensitive, based on feedback from our provider community, that winter, particularly around shelters, is not a time to introduce significant changes to access.
We have a question for Mr. Dunbar.
Actually, it's not a question. I just
Oh,
want
a
to
comment.
note for the record that Mr. Weddleton, I believe, is on the phone now.
Yeah, I've been here for the meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
So you'll notice those red arrows point to, we are trying to, in partnership with the Assembly and the administration, identify some type of engagement center or day shelter that could work as a hub. Coordinated entry would start in that place. You'll also notice that there's an arrow pointing to scan cards and coordinated shelter intake. That is something that our provider community is working with us on. Beans and Brother Francis have actually volunteered to help us pilot this through the winter, which we are deeply appreciative for because they have the biggest scale in the community, and for them to take on a pilot in the winter, particularly with some of our other community changes, is a significant ask, and we are grateful for their participation. And then what you can also see is that focus on the intensive services. I feel like we don't communicate enough that there's about 7,200 people that flew through the homeless response system last year that found housing and will likely never come back to us again. We tend to focus on the 94 people that we saw in the winter who were unsheltered. We know that number swells in the summer, but there is a visible population of people who experience unsheltered homelessness. We talk a lot about them. We don't talk about the other folks getting served by the system in a healthy, happy, stable way. So what you'll see with these last two arrows is recognizing community concern and those who are living in unsheltered circumstances and their needs. We really want to prioritize fixing coordinated entry for those who need the most intensive services. So when we talk about navigation, what you'll see is our hope is to pilot front-end navigation to kind of stop people from coming into our pipeline, but also focus on the very high-end navigation. What other communities tell us gets people out of camps into stable housing requires relationship building and frequent touch points and trust building to help people very significantly change how their life is lived. And so those are sort of our visions for 2020. It's a bit complex because it's a large, complicated system, but I did want to make sure that we were talking about what's actually going to change in 2020.
Have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, thank you for presenting this, Jasmine. And I just want to note that this was, at least in very micro part, a part of the conversation that we had when the Beans contract came before us, and Ms. Alatel, Mr. Constant, and I met with the 3rd Avenue Radicals. And we really honed in on this need for a navigator, although I think what you're presenting is much more expansive. So I think members of this body are very much in line with what the intent here is, and thank you for these efforts.
Yes, Ms. Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to ask a clarifying question, Ms. Boyle. So the coordinated entry system, I was under the impression we already did something quite like that. I mean, that we've been hearing talk about a coordinated entry system for the last several years. So can you describe to me what exactly is going to change? Is it going to be a person? Is it going to be a place? Like, what exactly is going to change from what we've already been doing? Because again, I thought we were already doing this.
We did implement coordinated entry in 2017, and what it looks like is simplified. Currently, if you are experiencing homelessness and seek out help through 211 through a provider, we will say, please come to one of our access points and complete an assessment.
Okay.
We lost 50% of our access points when the state budget changes occurred because they were all volunteered, but staffed through volunteers and provider organizations. So what we are finding is we created several bottlenecks by implementing this system. What we are looking to do is build a system where we remove those bottlenecks. So to explicitly answer your question, it is about changing location, changing structure, and changing people. 100% of the people who come to anyone for help should be on our by name list. And this is about removing that front door assessment that bottlenecks people and saying everybody on our by name list should be connected to triage. We should see some massive outflow from the by name list at the front door if we're triaging people at the beginning versus waiting until they've been living on the streets for 2 years and then finally connecting to them. So it's all three. And I don't want to take up too much time, but I'm happy to dig in with as much detail as would be useful.
Okay, one follow-up. So you said that the state funding cut. Now, most of the state funding was cut and then restored. What was the state funding cut that created the bottleneck you described?
So of the 6 shelters that were supported through the HAP funding that took that 20% reduction, many of them had to cut day services or case management services to survive that 20% cut. And those employees quite frequently were the folks that had been trained in how to do these assessments and that had been volunteered by those organizations to do that access point work for us. So we just lost the time on people's calendars, which was used to provide these assessments to funnel people into the system.
Very quick follow-up. So I don't know, I don't think I see any journalists in the crowd, but I think that what you just said is a story that needs to be told in the public, because we're going to, in a couple months, actually next month, start the budget conversation at the state again. And I think the perception among a lot of people is the governor tried to cut the homelessness budget. There was a large public outcry, and then it was restored. The vetoes were reversed. But that isn't the case. What actually happened is there was a large cut, 20%, maybe more, and it's harmed us in very specific ways that I don't think the public realizes. So, we here at the Assembly have been doing a variety of things to try to alleviate homelessness, but the state is moving in the opposite direction. And we really need you or anyone else to tell that story, because I do not think the public knows it. I think the public sees our efforts and doesn't understand what's happened with the state budget cuts on this specific issue.
Ms. Kennedy. Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I want to talk a little bit, that number of 2,200 that you pretty much head off before they really even become people that are on the street, I think is quite impressive, and that probably is a story that the public doesn't hear. But what the public does see are the ones who are on the street. And I think one of my questions in this is I recognize that most of what happens and is for those that are volunteering to be in the system or to get help. They're the ones that you actually can reach out to and they accept the help. What in any of this can be done for those that are basically just refusing help and are just going to stay where they are because that's what they want to do? I mean, is there any part of this that can reach that group that to really help get some of them off of the street?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay.
What we have found is there is a tremendous community interest in resolving our unsheltered homelessness. And the reality, and I think the data supports gut intuition, the more time someone spends in unsheltered homelessness, the more likely they are to fall into addiction, to violence and trauma. sleeping outside is not safe, particularly for women. And so you can imagine that we further complicate the trauma and vulnerability of people the moment they sleep outside at night. So there is a significant effort to provide navigation on the front end, because we obviously are all in agreement that we want to stop people coming into our pipeline from becoming more vulnerable. However, the flip end of that is to really focus the other navigation pilot in 2020 on the people who are already living on the street. Evidence-based work around the world tells us if you take the time to build a relationship with someone who is living unsheltered, it takes time and there's trust building required, but people will eventually come inside and connect to services. There's a big difference between shelter and housing. So I think sometimes we go to folks living in unsheltered homelessness and say, you know, you're not coming to a shelter, you must not want to be housed. I have yet to meet someone living outside who would not take a home. I have met many people who would take a camp over a shelter, particularly a large congregate care shelter. So what navigation does, and I'll keep pointing back to Houston, they reduced their unsheltered homelessness by about 50% over several years. And it was because they had triage that was a combination of police enforcement around camps, working with city folks that perform in a capacity similar to CAP and MIT, and social service providers. And what we heard was, for Houston, it was about a 6-month runway, that they had to spend about 6 months to connect to 100% of people in a particular camp, but they were coming every week. They were coming with coffee, they were coming with bus vouchers. And once that trust was built, what they found is when it was time to abate the camp, a huge portion of those people, they usually quote about 90 to 92%, were ready and willing and able to move with them to housing or to a long-term like transitional home, because they trusted that their needs were being met in that move. It is not dissimilar from a clinical perspective to people coming out of the military or people coming out of other traumatic and abusive situations, that there is a significant life change moving from the woods to moving to a home. So we have to give people the time and connectivity to make that flow, but it does work.
Yes, Ms. Burke.
If I could just clarify Assemblymember Dunbar's question, the kind of funding that was cut is a key thing that I think is not generally well understood. The Homeless Assistance Program is an operations program funded through Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, and it's described a little bit like oil in the machine. It's the money that allows you to prevent someone from coming into homelessness or to respond with case management to those who are in the system. And this other category that was cut but then was restored, the Special Needs Housing Grant Program, is primarily a capital program. So when funding was restored, it wasn't restored in the same places, and that's where the challenge comes in. You have your points in the community who had those case managers who could do the assessment to get people on the list, reduce that staffing, and so now we're in this place where we can't actually get people connected to the list. And it also, the question that's open for the coalition and 211 and those of us monitoring the data is how many more people are going to come into homelessness because they can't access those funds that would have maybe helped them catch up on rent or take care of something that was broken in their home or something and prevent homelessness. So the place the cuts happened is also significant.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Boyle on coordinated entry? Okay, then we will move on to the FAQ follow-up. Ms. Burke.
This, the presentation that's on the screen is something that is a collection of questions and presentations that have been happening across the community. And I just lost it, so it's okay. It was just to show you that there is a now 52 slide presentation that we have that's documented the FAQ, the questions that have come, and explanations like coordinated entry and Built for Zero, how the system works. And we're working with the coalition to put this in a much more digestible format so that people can maybe pull off sections and review the slides, perhaps with a voiceover that explains what's happening, so that we can break down this very complicated system into some bite-sized chunks. So this is in development. There's also a fairly extensive acronym list that we're developing for people who are new. That's something that's a challenge, and then an FAQ sheet. And Jasmine and her staff and I are going to be having intensive meetings here early in December to queue all this material up so it's ready for FY 2020 when the new priorities are announced, community council meetings for a number of different forums. So this resource is coming.
Great, thank you. Any questions about that? I know Mr. Dyson will very much appreciate having the acronym sheet ready to go. He reminds us not to talk now.
We're crossing fields. We're putting in behavioral health acronyms also. So
Oh, great. All right, so I'll just remind, if there are questions that you haven't been able to find information to, we're continuing to gather those so that we can get that information to Ms. Berg and the coalition as we work on the FAQs, because we want them to be responsive to the questions you have. Any committee discussion? I just want to take a moment to thank my colleagues for all their hard work and support as we address homelessness in the budget. I think it's a really great step, and the community for its engagement in the conversation. I think that was really fantastic. And personally, I'm very excited about the new coordinated entry. I've had a little bit of time with it, about a month with that graphic, and I think it's a game changer, so I'm really, really excited. Anybody else? Okay, we will go on to audience participation again. Just kind of come around at the table. Be sure to state your name. 3 minutes.
My name is Rose Hubbard, and I'm with the Anchorage Communal Homeless Village Project. First, I want to say that the coordinated entry system, although it's flawed and has issues, is a big step forward from having absolutely nothing. There was a time when you just kind of came and went and came and went. My dad was at Brother Francis Shelter when David Rittenberg was first hired. So he knows the system in and out. And now he is housed. He is transitional housing, but the changes that are being made, although they seem like they're slow processes, they take time to implement. And I understand that everybody else is frustrated, everybody's pissed off, everybody's mad, but yes. But this didn't happen overnight. This situation didn't happen overnight. It's a situation that built up over time. So you're not going to find an overnight fix. You're not going to get that snap and resolve issues. So I want to say thank you to all the people in this room and all the committee members for all your work, all your effort, putting up with everybody, including me. And I want to say that there are tons of people out in the community that are willing to put our boots on the floor and help you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony or participation. Next. Yeah, come on.
Hello, my name is Niall Williams. I just wanted to say that the issues of homelessness will not stop until our issues of moral bankruptcy are solved. That starts in the home. First, the family needs to become strong again. Your example with hospital was very good. However, I would like to take it a step further. So imagine it like this. You have an infected sore on your toe, right? Most people would go to the doctor, but if you don't have health insurance, what are you going to do? Maybe you're going to try and cover it up yourself. Maybe pick out the broken nail. Okay, that didn't work. Well, I guess we can go to the clinic. Now, they charge $300 to go to the clinic, so we go to the ER. Well, ER for little hangnails, problem. You know, there's lines of women and children coming from Barrow, Alaska, Bethel, wherever, coming from all over to get their long-term care. And when they arrive, they're behind someone with that hangnail who also needs care now because his or her leg is swelled up. Well, yeah, if you would have just spent $50 on day 1, you wouldn't have had $10,000 on day 10. But that's an enumeration of choices, and we all make every day. You choose to look away. You vote with your dollars. You vote with your lack of voice every day. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to participate? Mr. Haberman? Okay.
Does it work? Is it on?
Yep, it's
Okay.
working.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I live in the Matsu Valley and I follow a lot of meetings. One is a repeat of what I said earlier at the same meeting here. I do like to compliment both administration and assembly addressing the homeless issue. You've been doing it for some time. You're not ignoring it. I'm not saying it's perfect the way you're handling it, but at least you're dealing with it and not ignoring it. In reflection out in the valley, the second largest populated area in the state, I yet to recall a single time when the homeless issue was addressed by the Borough Assembly, except for one occasion when you had a joint meeting with the Borough Assembly, not the last one, but the previous one, which was in Anchorage at the Election Center, and a member of the Anchorage Assembly asked a question, is there a homeless issue in the valley? And the response was by Assemblymember Sykes, not at all. So that's basically the parameter. Since those comments I said here, it's still not being addressed out there as far as the Assembly is concerned at the meetings. There are people in the public that are involved and are concerned about homelessness. But if you go to a Borough Assembly meeting, I've yet to recall a single time where it's mentioned. So again, I'd like to say, at least you're somewhat addressing the issue, not perfect, but you're doing a far ahead in addressing the issue compared to what's going on in the valley. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else like to participate? Just one time. Sorry.
We got time, let her talk. We got time, no one else is talking. Go ahead, listen. How about me? They shipped those people in from the valley.
All right, so
it was published in the Catholic
no one else is
Anchor.
going to participate that hasn't already spoken. All right, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. All right, thank you.